Well, greetings, people of the internet. Unky Joe here, Unky Joe's Playhouse. Did you miss me? I'm back. That's right, I'm back. And first of all, let me apologize for not putting a video out last week. I was busy. Look, I'm a one-man band here, and I've had a couple of clients decide to spend end of the year money at the same time. So I've been busy trying to get these two major clients of mine, get their networks expanded. And frankly, I've been doing I've been learning. That's what I've been doing. I've been teaching myself some new skill sets while I'm trying to run a business and trying to run a home and, all the other stuff, life. But here I am now. And what we're going to talk about today is, for me, it has been for me, the holy grail of computer building and server making and that kind of thing has always been to build a machine that could host virtual machines that could have pass-through video. I don't know why I'm obsessed about it, but I have been for a long time. It's been like something I've been trying to do, but I never felt comfortable doing it myself. I thought it was way out of my pay grade. And instead I decided to buckle down and learn how to do it. So that's what this video is about today, how I taught myself how to do this, and how hopefully what I've learned I can teach to you, and you can do it as well. Before we get into this video, I can hear people out there screaming, well, you could do it with Unraid, you could do it with a bunch, you could do it with VMware, you could do it. It's the same old song and dance, and I have done this before. I got multiple video cards working on that X3650 Model 3. I never had what I would call stability, though. I was never quite comfortable with the way it worked. And Unraid, man, oh man, I love Unraid, I really do. But if you've ever dealt with virtual machines under Unraid, at least in previous versions of Unraid, it's always hit and miss when you go to edit a virtual machine. And unless you're very well skilled in Unraid and know all the ins and outs of it, I tried it. It just didn't work out for me. But I did come back to Proxmox, and man, I tell you, I've done another video on Proxmox. I'm going to keep doing videos on Proxmox. I really believe in the product. It's an excellent hypervisor. It dots all the I's and crosses all the T's as far as I'm concerned for a hypervisor. And as I learn more about it and I do more videos about it, I'll teach that to you as well. So today it's all about getting a machine up and running that can run Proxmox, that I can put a couple of video cards into and pass them through to virtual machines. So I have the motherboard that can do it. It's an older Gigabyte motherboard, but I have an Intel chip that I'm going to be putting in here. We're going to start out with an i5-3470 and we'll see what happens. And the reason I'm doing that is because that i5 chip also has its own video built into it. So I can have the onboard video, the benefits of having onboard video, plus this motherboard has two PCI Express slots in it. One is at 16, one's at 4, that I could put some video cards into and do pass-through, and pass them through to Windows 10 virtual machines, and then give those virtual machines to people and actually let them test them and see how they work and see how the performance is. So, ooh, that was a cotton-picking mouthful. Let's get the video started right now. Now, if there's ever been a more prominent machine on this channel, it's this one, or I should say motherboard. I just cannot, for the life of me, get rid of this Gigabyte motherboard. I have two of these now. And what I was doing is digging for CPU cooler, RAM, that kind of thing. So this is that Gigabyte GAZ7DS3H, I believe, if memory serves me. And that thing just supports a wide variety of processors. Now what I was doing here is removing the extra special and expensive cooler I got. You'll notice by the brown fan. I'm not going to mention their name, but you know who they are. So I had to rob that cooler and put it on this motherboard with the, I had an i5 3470 is the CPU that's in there. And so I'm taking everything out of here. We're going to get, we've already got the old CPU fan off. I put the i5 processor away in a safe location back when I retired it. And man, hold on to old motherboards, that's all I can say. And then I was attempting to put the CPU cooler back on, and then we'll get it installed back into the tower case. Now the tower case I have for this thing is just it's a really thin metal case. Actually, I think it's a gigabyte case. Don't ever buy gigabyte cases. They're cheap. Well, the ones I've had dealings with are cheap. They're not cut your fingers cheap, but they do have rolled edges. But the material is very flimsy and easy to bend. So I'm going to get board standoffs and all kinds of stuff to get this board mounted back in here. And I did a lot of work to get this thing going. Now originally I was going to use a spinning hard drive to install Proxmox, but then I came across an SSD drive. This is like a 750 watt power supply I'm putting in here. It's totally overkill, but I've got it on hand. I'm going to use it. I'm not going to buy a new power supply for this build. That's the beauty of these home labs, is you can do them on the cheap. So, but I am a firm believer in a clean layout for power and motherboard, and it's just so much easier if you take the time, do a little bit of cable management. It's going to make your life a whole lot easier. So I'm getting everything plugged in, all the front panel connectors, getting out my viewing glass there so I can see, and yeah, getting everything ready to fire up for the first boot, because it's been a while since I had this motherboard up and running. I did find 4 sticks of 4 gig RAM, so I was able to give this thing 16 gigabytes of RAM, which is fine for what I'm going to use it for, because this machine is just a proof of concept that I am capable of doing video pass-through with video cards on Proxmox. But you'll just notice I just took the video cards out. I booted it up and took the video cards out. Now, why do you suppose that is? Well, I had a dream. And actually, I had an epiphany. I had everything up and running with the i5 3470. But frankly, folks, that CPU has no hyper-threading. So I only had 4 cores to use. And it just could not cut the mustard. So I remembered I had purchased an i7 CPU 6-8 months ago from China, and I decided I'm not using that home theater PC anymore. We went another route, so I figured, hey, it's actually a 4-core 4-thread CPU. So let's put it to good use. And so that's what I did. I put it inside of this unit. Here I was trying to get the fan mounted again without having to unhook the motherboard connectors, because it's such a pain to hook them back up, isn't it? So anyway, yeah, I finally just put my head back on and removed it from my rear end, and then I was able to figure out how to get the CPU cooler back on there. And then the next step, of course, is to reassemble everything and then start from scratch. Because I'm going to tell you, It's just good habit. If you're changing out a CPU, go ahead and reload the base operating system if you can afford the time, because man, oh man, you're going to be a lot happier with the end result than you're going to be than trying to chase your tail to find some problem that you may have created by swapping out the CPU. Now you notice there, right there, I took the board back out. I felt on that board, I was like, it's missing a standoff and it feels weird. So when in doubt, remove the board and make sure you don't have a standoff laying on the base for the motherboard. Take the time. This motherboard is not replaceable. It's almost impossible to find these motherboards on the eBays. So there I was, booting it back up with the new CPU, and it saw it. And then I'm going to put a SSD inside of this thing. We're going to have an SSD to boot from. It's only 128 gig. That was all I had on hand. And then I'm putting my video cards back in. I put the AMD RX 560 in the first PCI Express slot. And then, even though this is not the K620, that's a GTX card, I did end up putting the K620 in here. So there you go, and now let's get everything working, eh? And here we are. So we've renamed this node, or I've named this node i7-3770. That way I can keep track of what machine I'm running on. And I'm glad I went ahead and swapped out the CPU in here. I had other plans for this i7. I purchased this about, 9 months ago on eBay. The idea was this CPU was going to go into a home theater PC for the bedroom, and then I thought better of it as time went on. Anyway, long story short, too late. It is now in this Gigabyte motherboard that I had the i5 3470S processor in. And the reason I went with the i7 is specifically because it's got 4 cores, 4 threads. So basically an 8X CPU that I can then put over to virtual machines, because when I did this with the i5, I wasn't, even though I've got SSD storage in here and plenty of RAM, I wasn't real pleased with the performance. So we're going to try this i7. Now, granted, it's a Gen 3 i7, but hey, you got what you got. So what we're going to do now is we're going to get started with making the changes we need to. For example, I've got a couple of virtual machines created here, but if I come out here to hardware and I try to add a PCI device, you'll see I'm getting an error message that no IOMMU is detected. Please activate it. Now, a couple of things you need to be aware of. One is you're going to need to go into the BIOS of your computer, whether it be Intel or AMD, and make sure that IOMMU is enabled. And under Intel, that's VTX, or is it VTD technology, in addition to allowing it to run, virtualization on there. There's another setting as well. But anyway, you'll need to go look that up for the individual board and BIOS you're using, because every one of them is different. And then you'll need to come in, and we'll need to edit some system files on Proxmox. So if that thing is, if the thought of that is scaring you, you may not want to do this. So I'm going to go into PuTTY though. So let me bring PuTTY up. We know our IP is 5.10 here. So let's go bring up PuTTY and we'll create a session. Let's see. .10 I said. Let's open it. Okay, I'll accept it. Now then, we need to log in, but we need to change some settings. I'm going to change that font to Lucidia console 12. All right, we'll go ahead and log in as root. All right, I'm going to go ahead and clear the screen. Sorry, I can't make it bigger. For the life of me, I can't get my brain to work today. So the first thing we're going to do is we need to tell the bootloader that we want to turn on IOMMU. So we're going to edit Grub. So in order to do that, we need to do Nano. Now I'll include links to the directions on how to do this after I get the video posted. So Etsy default /Grub. So I'm going to use Nano to edit Grub. So right now what I need to do is come down here to the Grub command line, and I need to add another command here. So after quiet, I'm going to put a space, and I'm going to type in Intel _IOMMU equal on. Then the other thing I'm going to do is tell it IOMMU equal PT. That is a command. I didn't mean to put those quotation marks. You only want quotation marks at the beginning of quiet and at the end of PT. The IOMMU equal PT is I'm hedging my bet that I don't have any trouble later down the line with putting devices in IOMMU groups. So that's what the PT command is. So I'm going to do Control X, and I'm going to go ahead and tell it yes to save it, and we're going to write out to Grub. Now, the next thing I want to do is update Grub so that gets written into the boot code. Okay, and then I think what we'll do is go ahead and reboot. Yeah, we'll go ahead and reboot this. Well, let's go ahead and do our other commands as well. We might as well, right? Yeah, let's do our other commands. So I'm going to edit. I'm going to Nano into Etsy, and we're going to go into the modules file, and we're going to add some modules. We're going to add VFIO. We're going to add VFIO _ IOMMU _ type 1 VFIO _ PCI and VFIO _ VIRQFD, and those are the Control X to save it, yes. And those are the modules we want it to load. Now, there's another command in here, a couple of commands, and they're used for interrupt remapping. Now, you have a choice at this point. You could try using those, or you could leave those commands out. And then come back if we have any problems later, which is what I think I'm going to do. Now, the next thing I want to do is I want to blacklist the drivers so that there's no chance Proxmox is going to use them, but just to let it know, hey, you're not allowed to use these drivers. So. And basically I'm just cutting and pasting, or copying and then pasting these commands in here that I've written down. And keep in mind, I'm doing this on my own notes that I've taken. I've done this so many times now that I've just got a set of notes that tend to work for me. Now I'm going to go ahead, now that I've made these changes, and I'm going to reboot Proxmox, and then we'll see if we've got our ability to have the IOMMU groups. So we'll give this a minute. All right, so now we're back at the screen, and it has survived a reboot. So let's go out under the virtual machine and see if we can add. Oh, looky there, our IOMMU groups error message is gone. And I should be able to come down here and see I've got a choice of either a Radeon RX 550 560 or a NVIDIA GTX 650, all tucked away in their own IOMMU groups. And that is a good thing because we're going to need them later when we go to assign a network or a video card to a virtual machine. So let me show you those steps next. Now, one of the things I have done previously with my Proxmox adventures, and if I haven't covered it before this video, I'll cover it in a video coming up. But I created a template over here called Windows 10 UEFI. So what I've done is create a virtual machine with all the settings I want in it. I want it 4 cores. I want a UEFI BIOS, 4 gig of RAM. It's a Q35 6.1, yada, yada, yada. So what I did was I created this machine, then I sysprepped it, and then I created a template out of it, which is what they call them under Proxmox. And then all I did was right-click and then choose to clone this to a new machine. So that's what I've done in the case of this Windows 10 machine here and this Windows 10 machine right here. So one of these Windows 10 machines has an RX 560 video card passed through to it. It's working, and I was successful, and I'm going to show you how I did that. Same thing with the Windows 10 with a NVIDIA K620 Quadro card passed through. It's working fine. And right now I have both machines busy doing various things. That's why you can see the CPU and RAM and network traffic and whatnot. So some of the commands I showed you a minute ago, the ones that you need to be aware of in order to enable IOMMU, you need to follow those. You also need to set the Intel _ IOMMU to PT. We covered that as well. So now what I'm going to show you is what you need to do to make sure that this is all going to work for you. I'm going to go to PuTTY, because you can do this through the Proxmox interface as well by coming here and going to the shell. But I'm just used to going out to it with PuTTY, so I'll go ahead and put my IP address in here. Click on open, and we'll log in as root. And we'll give it a password. All right. Now let me stretch the window here a bit and change the font. All right, there we go. So now what you're going to want to do is there is a specific file that you're going to want to create and edit. So the instructions for creating, what we're trying to do here is isolate the 2 video cards that I have from Proxmox and basically tell Proxmox, hey, don't use these under any circumstances. They're made to pass through to virtual machines. So that being said, we need to create a file to tell Proxmox when it boots up to isolate those cards, if that makes sense. So there's a couple of ways to do this. You can enter a couple of echo commands and it'll write the file for you. Or you can just go right out and you can edit the file. Now, I'll put links down in the notes of the show that link you to this article that one of many articles I followed, but basically this article is really good at explaining to you what each one of these commands are doing. Now, we've already gone through and configured Grub. Now, some of the things I did not do were disabling the frame buffer and using ACS override for IOMMU groups. I found that it wasn't necessary to use those in my setup. Now, this is where the key is. Each one of your setups are going to be different. I don't know what hardware, video cards, CPUs you have, what motherboard. So you're going to need to do a little research on this install on how to do this. The other thing I did was added the VFIO modules to the modules. And now what we need to do is if you need IOMMU interrupt mapping, I did not need this. You can put that in here. I strongly recommend you blacklist your drivers, the Radeon, the Nuvo, and the NVIDIA, so that those won't run. And then you'll need to add your GPU to the VFIO. So this tells Proxmox to exclude using those video adapters for anything. So that's what this command is for. Now, I have 2 video cards, so you'll need to run this lspci-v and pay particular attention to the IDs you get assigned to your video cards. For example, one of my video cards was 01:00, the other one was 06:00. Then you need to take those numbers that you get, the 1 and the 6, so you need to plug them into LSPCI to get the vendor IDs. You need to make a note of those vendor IDs, because what you're going to be doing is if it were a single video card, I would tell you just use this command here, this echo command. And that goes out and it creates a file called vfio.conf under the modprobe etc directory. I'm going to do that a little bit differently. I'm going to show you how I did mine. So if we bring up PuTTY, we'll go into Nano /etc. And Nano is just simply a text editor for Linux. So we're going to go to the modprobe.d directory, and then we're going to load vfio.conf. So what that, you see my line is a little bit differently. This is basically what the echo command did, right? But since I have more than one video card, I wanted to just edit the file myself. Now, don't do like I do and think that each line is an individual line. It's not. You want to combine them. So I've got my first video card. The IDs for that are right here. Then they're separated by a comma. This is the video card, and this is the audio portion of that. And then this is for my secondary video card, and its sound properties or sound card built into that for HDMI audio. And then I've got disable _ equal VGA equal 1. So that's how easy it is to do that. And it's very important. If you do not have this command in here and you don't have these addresses properly entered, it's not going to work for you. You're going to get all kinds of weird errors. So that goes beyond the scope of this video. But basically, this is one of the very important commands that you need to do to make sure you have done, or it's not going to work right. And then you need to run the update init RAM file system -u, and then you need to reboot the machine, your Proxmox machine. Once you've done that, then you can come down here if you haven't created a virtual machine and follow these directions on configuring the VM. What I'm going to show you next is how to configure a VM that you already have created. So let's go look at that right now. Now, it's very important you do a couple of things. First of all, you want to name whatever virtual machine you're going to do the pass-through on. You want to make sure you give that machine a name, and it's got either a hard-coded IP address that you're aware of, or you've got your guest agent in there so you can see what your IP address is like I do. Now, currently, and the other thing you want to do is enable remote desktop, because VNC is no longer going to work. As you can see, I've got failed to connect to server when I try to go to the console. You'll need to do this before you flip the video over, otherwise you're not going to have any video at all. So keep that in mind. Now this machine is running, so I'm not going to change it, but I am going to show you the changes I made. So if you come under hardware, a couple of things. Under the processors, I've gone in here and I've changed the type to host, and I've turned on PC ID. I've given that a plus sign. And what that does is these are some flags that tell it how to treat the CPU, how to pass the CPU through to the virtual machine. Because you want the machine to think it's not running virtually. you want it to think it's running, in a non-virtual environment. That can just help later with getting your video card to work right. You've got to make sure, and these instructions are in that article that I'm going to post a link to. Make sure you've got OVMF or UEFI BIOS enabled. And what I do here is simply pass through my PCI device. So I come here to add, I go to PCI device. I choose my PCI device, which is number 1 here. And it'll grab the audio portion of that automatically. And it'll put it in there. So if we go over to that device, you can see I've checked all these boxes, all functions, ROM bar, PCI Express, primary GPU, and advanced, and then click OK. Now, after you've done that, then you will come up here to summary and you will actually power on your virtual machine and bring it up. Now, you'll know it's working because what will happen is while you're powering that machine, in fact, let me just show you. I'm going to turn this machine off for a second. And you'll notice that this guest agent information will disappear after the machine shuts down. It'll say guest agent not running. So now you'll see the machine is stopped and nothing's on. So if we come down here again to hardware, same way with this one, except I use card number 6. I've given it all functions, ROM bar, PCI Express, primary GPU. But if I were to come here to the console and power the unit on, I'm not going to get anything because it's got a pass-through video card. So it's just going to tell me failed to connect to server. But if I come up here to summary and I monitor this area right here where it says IPs, once that comes up and gives me an IP address, then that'll tell me that I'm able to then log into the virtual machine. So we'll wait for that to come up. Now, if you have problems with this part, go out and check that command we entered. Make sure you've got the right hardware IDs in there. If you don't, none of this is going to work properly. But now we have our Windows 10 K620 machine up and running again. That's good. Let me see if I can log into it. You're not going to see that part, but that's okay. And there you go. I'm back in. It's up and running. So I'm going to put this back on summary. Yeah, perfect. Okay, so it's back up and running. So again, make sure you've got that command, this one here, entered correctly like I had shown you earlier. We can go back into that, just take a look. Those are the IDs for both of my video cards. And it's working well. But yeah, make sure you've got those commands in there correctly, or none of this is going to work. So right now, this machine, this is the one with the RX 560 video card. You can see it is passing through the card. You can see the temperature of the card. CPU is running. We're currently running Folding at Home on this unit, just so I could give it something to do while I was testing it. If we come up to the K620 and do the same thing here, you will see that we have the K620, the CPU, not doing much right now, but it is up and running, and the video card is being passed through. And we actually have the software loaded for NVIDIA and for the RX 560, the other one. So let's just go ahead and bring up Heaven here. I'm not going to do it full screen. That way you can see it running in the background. All right, so if I just minimize, you can see we're getting about 22, 23 frames with this older video card, but it is using the video card and CPU. It is firing it up. So if we were to just let this run, I believe we even have sound in this. Yeah, we even have sound, so that's a good thing. And there it is running. It does much better on the RX 560, but this one, it keeps the pace pretty well. So here we are back at the Proxmox screen. And you can see that even though I've got 4 CPUs assigned to each unit and 4 gig of RAM assigned to each one and a video card, we've still got a little overhead left. This is why I switched. I originally started this with the i5-3470, and it's only a 4-core CPU. It was just way too underpowered to handle this load. So I remembered that about 6 months ago I ordered a used i7, was it 3770 off of eBay, and that has 4 cores, 4 threads, so basically an 8-core or an 8 CPU processor. I put that in here and it's doing much better, because before it was, even though the virtual machines were getting good frame rates, it was a little laggy. So it is up and running. And let me tell you, I have been through the mill with this thing. It took a lot of hard work to get this to work, because I had to wrap my mind around how Proxmox isolates equipment and what all those... It's one thing to sit here and enter commands on a Linux prompt. It's another thing to know what they do, what effect they have, and what they changed. And I wanted to make sure that I wrapped my mind around what they were changing in Proxmox to get all this to work. Because as you know, this has been like the holy grail of computing for me for quite a while now, is to get video cards passed through to the underlying operating systems. So as a test, what we're going to do is I'm going to hand both of these virtual machines over to Jamie, who does some video editing for me, and let him have both units and try. I think he uses Vegas video editing. Let him go ahead and use these virtual machines and see what kind of performance he can get out of them, and if they're stable. These have been up and running now. The machine's been up and running 4 hours, 49 minutes. I shut it off overnight, but it ran all day yesterday just to make sure, and I ran these folding at home and a couple of video tests just to make sure everything was working okay. But like I said, I'll hand these over to Jamie as a virtual machine and let him have at them and see if he can crash them or, consequently get them to work. So I wanted to share some of the final scores with you. I did some Unigen benchmarks on these virtual machines once we got the video cards installed and the proper drivers. So let's start with the K620. This is on a... now, all the virtual machines were configured the same way. They had 4 cores, 4 gig of RAM, that kind of thing. So for the Quadro K620, our score was 24.1. So it didn't do too bad. Its final score was 606. And let's go look at the RX 570, and you'll see that it did pretty well. It got a frames per second of 51.0, a final score of 1284, and as you can see, it's the Radeon RX 560 series. So, yeah, and then I did some other benchmarks. Let's go look at Tropics. Did really well with Tropics on the K620. It actually got 50 frames per second. The RX 560 got a whopping 122. So an RX 560 running the Valley benchmark did almost 50 frames per second, or a score of 2085. Let's see, K620 Heaven. Yeah, we already did that one. Okay, and then I ran Sanctuary, and it did very well. That was on the K620, got an impressive 72.3. And on it goes. Superposition with the K620 got a 1507. And on the RX 560 got a 2444. So you see the scores were all over the place, but I just wanted to share those with you. So there you go. Now I am actually quite impressed with the performance I'm getting on these virtual machines. I left Heaven benchmark running overnight while both VMs were up and running, each one running its own copy of Heaven. This board's been rock solid ever since I got it. But even after I changed out, let me explain something to you here that I did, and I alluded to this in the video when I was talking about it. I didn't want to have any problems when I went from the i5 to the i7 processor. And I know that Proxmox is a little picky about equipment sometimes. I've noticed some glitches in the matrix, so to speak. That's the best way I can describe it. And the guys in my Discord chat will support me on this. I've loaded Proxmox the same way 2 times that had different results before. So I don't know if that's a matter of version 7 not being completely up to snuff yet, or it's just some combination of hardware that I've created this mess with. But I made sure when I put the i7 processor in here, I started from scratch. And that included the virtual machines. So what I do is I create a template of a virtual machine, or I create a Windows 10 virtual machine, I sysprep it, then I create a template out of it. And then I use those templates to create my new VMs from. And I did notice at one point when I was doing all this stuff with Proxmox that I had failed. I had made so many changes to the virtual machine to where it finally started throwing up these errors every time it came up. Evidently, at some point I screwed up the boot sector of the virtual hard drive or something, because it would no longer boot. And I ended up having to create a new virtual machine from scratch. Now, if you're going to try passthru, that's what I would recommend. Get to as clean a slate as you can. I have spent a good part of the last 3 weeks learning how to do all this, and I've learned it from other people. So if I can do it, you certainly can do it. And it just gives me more confidence about Proxmox. But there are those little glitches that I wanted you to be aware of that I ran into. One with Proxmox itself, and the other one with I was able to easily corrupt a virtual machine, and I shouldn't have been able to do that. And did I have a snapshot? Yeah, I had a backup image, but even after I restored the backup image and tried to do passthru, because of some combination of whatever, a comedy of errors, it just wouldn't work. But it's working now. So there you go, another Proxmox video done. I hope you feel it was worth the wait, and this machine will become a semi-permanent part of Unky Joe's Playhouse, because this will be the machine that Jamie edits on when he comes in and does video editing. He's going to do some testing on that in the next few days once I get him some footage. So it was a lot of fun doing it. Yeah, I really enjoyed this with the Proxmox, and I'll make sure I'll put the link to the art. I used several articles. I jumped around, and take those articles with a grain of salt, because each configuration and combination of hardware could be a little bit different. But there you go. We hope you found the video entertaining and informative. As always, please smash that like button if you enjoyed the video. Leave your comments down in the comments section. Let's subscribe if you're not already a subscriber, and click that notification bell to be notified of new videos when they come out. Thanks again for coming to see us. Donate if you're so inclined. We accept PayPal, Patreon, the YouTube join function. I want to thank each and every one of you for coming to see me. I appreciate it. And please don't forget, we'll see all of you on the other side.